Much for being with us. Mr. Rakesh Khar, who is the business and economy editor for the TV9 network. Rakesh ji, thank you so much for being with us. And we have the editor of News 9 Plus, Sandeep Unnidan, joining us on the special broadcast. Sandeep, thank you so much for taking time out to be with us. And of course, Vice President of News 9 Plus, we have Mr. Karthik Malhotra also joining in on this broadcast. So strap on your seat belts. We're going to get some really important things out there for you to understand, even as you look up and look forward to this budget that's going to be presented. Bear in mind, this budget has come in a year where there is no elections. Next year also there'll be a budget, but that will be before the all-important general elections of India in 2024. So this, in many ways, is being called the only full budget before the election year. So how's it going to go? It was preceded by a very strong positive economic outlook that was given by the Economic Survey. I'm going to begin by talking about that, Karthikeya. The Economic Survey painted this wonderful picture of India having done so well. So in that sense, this budget is coming at a good time for the government, isn't it? It's coming on the backlog of Indian economy doing so well.
I think more than that, this budget is coming at the backdrop of more than 7 assembly elections this year, and you have a general election next year, so Prime Minister will have to be very mindful of the electoral process. Secondly, if you look at the anatomies of the previous budget, our Prime Minister is a nuts and bolts person. He's not a reformist, he has not turned out reformist budgets like Manmohan Singh did, or big tweaks which Atal Bihari Vajpayee's budget did. I think he's more of a person who believes in streamlining the delivery mechanisms, and I think that's what he has done. He has made the government schemes which were a point of ridicule in press and even in the larger national narrative as something successful machines. So for me, if you say what do I look in this budget, I would say that I would look for fiscal prudence, I would look for growth, I would look for a little bit of sort of an injection of Labharti politics, because a lot of political parties are making tall claims that they can deliver. I think Prime Minister is also very mindful of the fact that because of the competitive politics, a lot of regional parties are promising stuff which is financially not prudent at all. For example, old pension scheme will now be implemented in 3 states. So apart from being a social scheme, it is also about financial pressure on our system. So Prime Minister will have to take into account all of that. But for me, how much does he create space for our defense will be important for me. Second, well, will it affect my wallet? That's the most important part. And thirdly,
that's what everybody is, isn't it?
Yes. And thirdly, can he create an element of larger well-being and security in the budget? I think is very important, because this is the election year.
And also it's the post-pandemic budget, so to speak. Technically, but out of the budget, first budget post the pandemic. Rakesh ji, everybody talks about the last budget before elections, but you would rather believe that when it comes to Prime Minister Modi, you can't count these things, last budget before elections, first budget after elections. He's going to go ahead and do what is needed for the country.
Absolutely, Karthik, you got it absolutely right. I would call it half-election budget. Because, knowing Mr. Modi, he is capable of springing surprises here today and also later as in the run-up to the elections. But, before we get to understand that, budgets are very important. It's a great media event. Yeah. And for a change today, the whole world will be looking at India, the Indian budget, with a lot of optimism. Given the IMF outlook and the entire growth story that India is in, it's called the bright spot. But it's important for all of us to understand that budget over the years has lost much of its relevance. It's a policy document. It's an important policy document. But decision making in terms of key economic decisions has happened not just in this government, it happened with the UPA also. They have been taken outside of the budget. Mr. Modi has made a virtue of it. Now I'll give you 2 specific instances. The first instance is this 80 crore food subsidy. It was announced a month and a half ago ahead of the budget. It fits, it's a great fit for a budget announcement, but it happened before that. Last year, on January 1st, the government announced the national semiconductor policy, whereas it should have happened as part of the PLI upgrade or should have happened as part of the manufacturing bucket. So be ready for surprises. My own view is that the economic survey yesterday said that we have recovered. Now recovery to resurgence, that's the track we have to lay. I think the budget will give broad pointers in that direction. The economic survey has also pointed out some very strong areas, but it's been frank and prudent to point out the grey areas, the concern areas, which I'll come to a little later. My own view is that the budget has to do this fine balancing act of managing nascent growth, nurturing it, and in the backdrop of fiscal challenges.
Absolutely.
So My view is that the budget will do surprise you possibly on the middle class quotient. Mr. Modi has been accused of being very good with the bottom of the pyramid. That's his core vote bank, which has only got consolidated. And he's given corporate tax cuts, so he's also pro, industry. And the middle class apparently has got a little shift, and all of us are in the middle class bucket. So I think from pure play political constituency, he will also try and address the middle class. That means there possibly could be some changes in the individual income tax bucket.
Absolutely. So many reports that are talking about a possible change in income tax slabs and income tax rates that could be expected in this budget 2023. We will wait for that, as Rakesh has also talked about. Sandeep, I want to come to you. So much talk of, what will happen going forward. Budget is, might not be as relevant as it was before. Well, how do you view this in the political context in which this budget is being presented?
Thanks, Krishna. Firstly, it's a political budget. There are no two ways about it, right? We are in the semi-final year. Next year, the semi-finals being the 9 assembly elections that are going to take place this year, beginning next month. And it's going to be a complete roller coaster till December 2023. The finals, of course, are the Lok Sabha 2024 elections. And I'll tell you what's at stake here. Prime Minister Modi is close to completing his second term in office. He's on the verge of getting a third term. When is the last time that an Indian Prime Minister was looking at 3 consecutive terms? It's 60 years ago. Pandit Nehru was the last person to do that in 1962. So that's what's at stake here. That's the reason this budget is going to be very, very crucial for this government. It's the last full budget. It's the last opportunity that they have to tell the people, like, we are here for you. Vote for us next year, this year and the next year. So these 9 state elections are going to be really critical because it's going to allow the BJP to build up a momentum towards the general elections next year and deny space to the opposition parties. Rahul Gandhi has been on a major walk. He knows exactly what's coming his way next year to prevent that. So the government will have to really move in with the budget this year to kind of deny space to the opposition to ramp up its cadres, to build up its confidence reserves ahead of the elections next year. So that's the reason I think what Rakesh ji said, that be ready for surprises. I'm all prepared for a surprise in this budget because I know this government has been very careful with the way it spends its money, right? But given the fact that what's at stake this year, you could be ready for a lot of surprises.
Absolutely. As you can hear these gentlemen, you can be rest assured that expect surprises. That's the first message coming in from this very special presentation here on News 9. All our senior editors talking about expecting surprises. I'm going to take this to Karthik Malhotra. Karthik, we're talking about surprises. I want to touch upon the economics bit of it all because this is, after all, a budget. A budget is about the economy to start with, and then it becomes politics. 2021, India logged 8.7% growth. 2022, India logged about above 7%. The projection for the next year is 6.5%, the range of 6 to 6.8%. Talk about the economic context in which this budget is being presented.
Right, Krishna. So I think I'm going to take a slightly contrarian point of view than what the editors on this panel have taken so far. Of course, we know it's election year and we know that this is a run-up to the general elections. And in light of that, it's important to expect surprises for the middle class. If you remember, Finance Minister on more than one occasion has said that she herself identifies with the middle class. So the middle class stocks are rising, right? The middle class is very, very positive that there is going to be an
finally, because we are the ones who are most ignored during budgets.
6 crore of us. There are just the 6 crore of us who actually pay taxes, right? But my point is, we are still talking about fiscal discipline. And we are talking about fiscal discipline leading hopefully to fiscal stimulus. So the budget, to quote the economic survey, has to show the glide path for the economy. Right. Now, okay, 6.5% sounds good, faster than all other economies, fastest growing major economy in the world, etc. But where are we poised right now? Where are we positioned right now? We are still roughly a $3.5 trillion economy, right? Compare us to, let's say, the US, the largest economy is at 21 trillion. China is at 18 trillion. Even if they grow or degrow, it's not going to, we are not going to be able to offset any of that with our 6.5%, right? So what I'm really trying to drive home the point is that you know, you've got to keep your fiscal discipline absolutely intact. You dole out cash, you dole out SOPs, it's going to hit your fiscal discipline.
Yes.
That is something you just cannot afford right now. We've got to continue to grow, and for a change, we've got to move away from supply-driven economics to demand-driven economics. Last 2 years, we've seen that there has been a lot of focus on supply-side reforms. We've got to now put the demand focus back on the agenda so that there is actual growth. Now, you know, what is GDP? In pure macroeconomic terms, GDP, Y, is defined as C plus G plus I plus X minus M. Theoretical. Y is the GDP, right? Consumption, government spending, investment, and export minus import. That's the current account deficit, right? So we've got to be very clear that we really need to focus on consumption to go up and not expect the government or the animal spirits of the corporate sector, as Rakeshji would point out later, to take charge of the GDP growth.
Absolutely.
We've got to focus on consumption.
I could not agree more with you, Karthik. And in fact, the economic survey did speak about the fact that the GDP for the last year, 58.5% of it was contributed by private consumption. That's people's consumption. That's a very important point. And so it's very important that people, the growth of Indian economy is demand-driven, consumption-driven, domestic demand and domestic consumption-driven. That's a very important point that Karthik is making. So we're talking about people, at the end of the day, people consuming, for which they need to have enough and more disposable income in their hands, and for which you need to have rationalized income tax slabs, and that's all we look forward to when it comes to a budget. Topmost priority for all of us, both here presenting this program and those watching as well. I'm going to take this to Karthikeya. Karthikeya, budget for the journalists or otherwise, media or otherwise. Budget means what is going to happen to my income tax. And this time around, the expectation is that the minimum income tax limit could be pushed up to 5 lakhs per annum. And we're talking about the maximum tax rate being brought down from 30% to 25%. All of these are expectations, ladies and gentlemen. What would you say? Do you think it's time to dole out more income tax incentives to India for the middle class to go out there and consume?
I think if you ask me, more people should be paying taxes. Rather than the pool of people which is already available, you squeeze them out. I think the biggest challenge for every Prime Minister, every Finance Minister in this country, and I think Modi has succeeded in that, is how do you get more people to pay taxes? Now you have indirect tax regimes, GST, where you tax everything because you know that there is an inability within the system to get everyone to pay the similar taxes. For example, we have a political economy around the farmers. It is a disincentive in the larger policy making. You can't tax the farmers. You have schemes like, for example, you have a Prime Minister scheme for farmers in which you give 20% rebate. But BRS in Telangana is running a Raitu Bandhu scheme, which is 100% subsidy. That subsidy does not distinguish between a rich farmer, a Rayat, a small farmer, a middle farmer, or a temporary farmer, sort of a seasonal farmer. So I think Prime Minister has demonstrated his will through building e-pathways, digital infrastructure, so that more and more people pay taxes. If you are asking me specifically a question on tax, I think more people should be taxed. Agrarian sector should be re-scrutinized. I think, that's like a holy cow. You talk about it, you discuss it on television, but you don't tax them. You have free water. I know I'm being completely apolitical here. You give them free water, you have free electricity, 90% of the water table is diverted to agricultural exercises, but no hard decisions are taking place. The only hard decision, which again I would give the credit to the Prime Minister, was when he started the campaign for Mota Anaj, millets, because that's where, where is your water going to? Rice and wheat. So if you ask me, the budget should also create a sort of a mood change, like 1980s, the tiger economy, the mood of the nation changed. They started manufacturing, or something which happened when Mao passed away, and the small scale industries came up. So I would like my budget, as Rakesh was saying, to create a sort of a roadmap in terms of manufacturing. We fail when it comes to manufacturing. Our MSME might be the backbone of employment, but in terms of innovation or creating export-oriented stuff, we are nowhere. Look at Bangladesh, you get all these foreign t-shirts manufactured in Bangladesh. 10 years ago, it was in Vietnam, and 20 years back, it was in South Korea.
So, Karthikeya, talking about the fact that there is no question of reducing income tax rates. We as a country are not taxed enough And also the tax net is not wide enough is the point you're making. More people should be brought under the tax umbrella. I'm sure Rakesh ji agrees more with that as well. Rakesh, if you can take off from what Karthikeya is saying.
Absolutely. We need to widen the tax base. In fact, I fail to understand, despite reformist prime ministers like Manmohan Singh and now again,
Rakesh ji, if you can just hold on to your thoughts. Fresh visuals that are just coming in of India's Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman. Those are the visuals, the latest visuals with the Bahi Khata. Bahi Khata, which is the Hindi word for the account book, or the book in which the budget for the year 2023 has been made.
Digital again.
This is the e-Bahi Khata, or the digital Bahi Khata that is being held by India's Finance Minister. I'm going to take this back to the discussion over here. Rakesh ji, as she gets inside North Block, inside the Parliament to present the budget, talk to us. Who should be brought under the tax net?
First of all, I think these are very impressive visuals for a country, where we have a woman as the finance minister presenting her 5th budget. This should inspire the entire generation, to take up politics as a profession.
And finance, specifically becoming the finance minister.
No, finance, the BFSI sector is largely driven by women. We know that. It's
in the corridors of power.
In the corridors of power. Okay. So I think that's a good start to the day. And so coming back to the income tax issue, let me put it in context again. I'm playing the spoiled sport here. We have 42.14% as the highest individual income tax slab, which I think is a global record. And then we have 25.4% for corporate tax. Mr. Modi cut down corporate taxes, which I'm very happy about. I'm proud about that. It's a reformist move. And then we have millionaire farmers, many of whom were camped here in Delhi for months, for a year about, who don't pay any income tax. So there is a major reimagination needed of the entire tax structure. And the individual income tax, remember, Krishna, pays it twice. You get taxed on your salary, and then this entire GST buoyancy is also happening because we pay tax on whatever we consume. So that's why I said I think there is need to take that bold decision. And if you remember, when Mr. Modi came into power in 2013, the BJP political manifesto had listed exemption till 5 lakh rupee income. We are in the 9th year, and we are nowhere near there.
Absolutely. Sandeep, election promises, government promises. One important promise that's not been kept for the lowest of the economic strata in the country.
Which promises?
We're talking about the fact that, the BJP, Rakesh Kaji is talking about the fact that the BJP promised the minimum income tax exemption limit to be at 5 lakhs, but it's currently still at 2.5 lakhs.
Well, that's just keeping in with what we were discussing earlier, Krishna, the fact that the middle class, one of the most enthusiastic votaries of this government, they feel left out for the last so many years, almost reaching the end of the second term of the BJP government, and the middle class haven't really got anything much in return, and especially when it comes to the tax slabs and the income tax thing. And so far, I think the government has really transformed the way taxes are collected. I mean, just look, GST. GST is unbelievable. The kind of taxes that the GST collections are record. I mean, over 1 lakh crore. Who would have thought?
Second highest GST collections ever for the month of January 2023, 1.56 lakh crore.
Absolutely. And
But
this is like...
Sorry.
No, go ahead, Karthik.
So you've got to take into account that GST collection also is not purely on account of more consumption happening in the society. It's also on account of inflation.
That's right.
Things are priced higher.
Right.
So obviously the tax outgo on the same commodities, maybe in lesser quantity being bought, is higher. But I think sticking to direct taxes, what I'm really hopeful that this government is going to do away with in the next 30 minutes, beginning in the next maybe about 40 minutes.
Countdown has begun. Less than 30 minutes to go for the budget.
40
Less than 30
minutes. Is you can't have 2 tax regimes. It is confusing. You can't have an old tax regime and a new tax regime and spend days, hours with your CA trying to understand where can you save those additional 100 rupees or 1,000 rupees. I think you can't have 2 tax regimes.
You have to simplify the...
It has to be simplified, right?
Absolutely.
And once it is simplified, obviously the tax net also broadens, right? You'll have more people coming in. Secondly, I think there's taxflation in Section 80C. It is stuck at 1,50,000 rupees, inflation not being accounted for. Come on, prices have gone up, salaries have gone up. You can't have a situation that your ATC is stagnant at 1,50,000 rupees.
Absolutely. And in that direction, was there a case for a higher exemption from home loans in your income tax?
There are expectations. So from 2 lakhs, it's expected to go up to 4 lakhs. So those expectations are also there. There are also expectations on investment-related taxation, which is the LTCG, etc. And
the long-term capital gains tax for all those watching. LTCG is long-term capital gains tax. The tax you pay on long-term money that you earn from investments. So talk to us, Karthik, about LTCG. And there's also STCG, which is the short-term capital gains tax. From what I understand, the STCG could be and should be done away with, and there should be a rationalization of LTCG, because currently the way the LTCG is taxed, every asset class has a different holding period.
That's
and
right.
again, more confusion,
Absolutely.
like a different tax regime, isn't it, Karthik?
Absolutely. So right now, LTCG is flat 10%, but the tenure of the investment is defined differently. So for example, for equities, the holding period is 1 year. For real estate, the holding period is 2 years. For debt mutual funds or debt-based market instruments, the holding period is 3 years. So again, simplification of taxes, even in the context of LTCG, is important. Now, what this could eventually do, and in debt mutual funds, in fact, you also have the advantage of indexation.
Yes.
Right. So indexation again is linked directly to inflation. So what happens is, let's say you've bought a debt mutual fund at 100 rupees 3 years ago. You've held on to it for 3 years. It has given you some dividend. You are not taxed at a flat 10% on the dividend. Rather, that 100 rupees of investment has also been accounted for inflation. So 6% inflation, 5% inflation, 8% inflation. So if you've made 30% on your investment, you're not paying 30 rupees ke upar some tax. You are actually, your principal, your investment has been adjusted to, let's say, 110, 112 rupees depending on inflation over the last 3 years, and you're liable to pay tax only on the 20 rupees, not the 30 rupees. So I think rationalization in terms of the tenure, the holding period of all asset classes becomes critical here.
Right, and Rakesh, probably because of all the problems related with investing in speculative things, is the reason why we saw a huge rise in fixed deposits in this country for the last year, and it sort of tells you the mood of the nation, so to speak.
Actually, Krishna, 2022 has been remarkable. You talked about the huge FD, bloat, if I can call it. 2022 also witnessed India, in the stock market. It's been a huge rally.
True.
We've beaten the global estimates. Of course, today we have come down to the 5th spot. But the fact of the matter is that for the first time, such large number of retail investors took to stock markets. So that gave us a huge cushion against outflows, which happened in between, and we could have a very stable and robust growing stock market. A small point before I get to the, on the income tax, we must credit this government for the digitalization of, say, your returns. If you got, returns, you file your returns, you get your refunds. One of the fastest regimes in terms of refunds has been this particular government, and also redressal. So the same reimagination has to happen, like Karthik mentioned, at the back end when it comes to actually doling out that money. I want to come back to the fiscal prudence issue.
Okay.
I would say let this budget be boring except the middle class bucket, where there should be a cake. Because if you do anything outlandish, let me complete. If you do anything outlandish, there is bound to be trouble. So we are in the world. We live in a VUCA world,
Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. The
absolutely.
VUCA world.
So we haven't come out of that. There are unknowns. So fiscal prudence is something that we should stay focused.
Karthik, I want to come in.
See, every prime minister has its political signature. I'll give you an example. In 1970, between 69 to 70, Indira Gandhi was having a run-in with the reformists, people who believed that the economy should move to the right, not to the left. Now, Indira Gandhi removed Morarji Bhai, and Morarji Bhai then used to be the finance minister. And in 1970, the budget used to be presented at 10 p.m. Vajpayee changed the tradition to 11 a.m.
Karthik, just hold on to your thoughts. We have Honorable Amit Shah now joining in for the budget session. It's going to begin in minutes from now. All the big leaders, there you have Minister Rajnath Singh, you have Amit Shah, our Home Minister, all the big wigs of the government entering the Parliament building as we speak, ladies and gentlemen. Budget 2023 presentation about to begin in less than 15 minutes from now.
And news is coming in, Prime Minister has reached as well, and so has Finance Minister Nirmala
Oh yeah.
Sitharaman.
There's a cabinet meeting which takes place before the budget.
Absolutely.
So that's a routine cabinet meeting which is taking place. The budget will be presented, it will be cleared, and then the budget will be laid on the floor of the House at 11 a.m. That's when Nirmala Sitharaman starts to speak in Lok Sabha. So this is like a ritual budget meeting.
Right.
Coming back to the point, So Indira Gandhi got the time. She called all the MLAs because the right-wing MPs within the Congress party were trying to delay. They never want that budget to be presented by Indira Gandhi, and then she was holding the finance portfolio. And then she said that the purpose of the budget is poverty alleviation, something which became a hallmark of her election in 1971.
The Garibi Hatao.
Garibi Hatao. Actually, the slogan was given by Madhu Danvate and George Fernandez, Indra Hatao, which Mrs. Gandhi turned it around as, वो कहते हैं Indra Hatao, मैं कहती हूँ Garibi Hatao. So it was part of the budget. Now, if you look at the budgets of, presented by Rajiv Gandhi or Atal Bihari Vajpayee, they had underlaid political signature. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Khan. Prime Minister has been somehow, he came on the promise of minimum
government, maximum governance.
Maximum governance. Now, what has happened is with his so-called at that point of time agenda which suited the Bombay industry, he has created a huge subsidy architecture. And that subsidy architecture is part of his politics. And that is the elephant in the room. When you were talking about taxes, when you were talking about fiscal prudence, or when you were talking about tightening up belt, where is that money going? Let me be the devil's advocate here. In last 8 years, the huge subsidy architecture or the Nehruvian architecture he has resurrected is something mind-boggling. And it is there. If you look at the funds which are being parceled out, or for example, yesterday when we had this conversation with Rakesh, Narega.
Yeah.
Narega needs a reform. But what do you do every budget to park more money in Narega? You have more money in a place where no economic assets are being created. So I think as a citizen of this country, I need a reformist budget. I need a budget like Manmohan Singh or Atal Bihari Vajpayee. I need a budget where new ideas on table. Prime Minister has perfected the first stage. Good schemes, digital pathways, delivery to the last person. But what is the new idea? Something which turned around the South Asian economies, tiger economies, something which turned around China, something which happened in Japan after 1950s. So that, or for example, which is happening in America now in terms of the chip economy. So,
Sandeep, are you expecting this? This is a big statement from Karthikeya. We need a huge turnaround budget that can just take us to the next level. Like Jumanji, you reach the next level. So we have to, our economy has to reach the next level now.
Next level.
Saatveं आसमान पे.
But why is it so surprising? Because this is the Prime Minister who's consistently pushing the envelope in terms of goals, right? I mean, he first said 75 years, we've reached 75 years. He's now given the next goal, which is the Amrit Kal, the next 25 years, right? I mean, I remember not so long ago, there was a diplomat I was speaking to about 10 years back in the final years of the UPA government. He said, you know, I look around in Delhi and nobody has any goals. It's just like people, the only people in India with any goals are the Maoists in the jungles. You know, they hope to capture power by 2040 and 2050. There's nobody else with any plan. Oh. So here you have finally a man with a plan, and he's saying that, you know, we have to be a developed nation by 2047, which is the 100th year of India as an independent nation. So that's commendable. And the other thing, very quickly, Krishna, I was just looking at Rajnath Singh ji coming into Parliament, the defense minister. Now, defense accounts for 14% of the union budget. It's the ministry with the largest spend, right? It spends something like 75 billion in the defense budget, in the union budget. And look at the way the government has been spending its defense rupee over the last couple of years. The trend has been for a huge spike in the defense budget every time there's a national security crisis. Whether it's the war with China or it's 1971 or the Kargil war, the defense budget shoots through the roof, right? But for the first time in 2020, you saw, despite the mobilization on the borders with the Chinese army there in Ladakh, all the muscle flexing that was going on, you had a very calm and composed defense budget. You know, there was no major spectacular rise. It was just a regular 4% or something rise. And this government has held the course on the defense budget as well. You would have thought for huge spending, you know. Actually,
Sandeep, it's innovated in a big way.
It has.
A big idea. For the first time, we have a robust pipeline of defense exports.
Absolutely.
Which brings down the import bill.
So that is, you know, I'll just very quickly, since you brought this up, how they've been kind of reimagining the defense budget. There are two big pressures on the defense budget, right? The fact is that India is the third largest defense spender in the world, after the US and China. But unfortunately, we're spending more than 50% of the defense budget on salaries and pensions, right? So we're spending something like 50 to 60% on salaries and pensions, whereas the correct ratio should be 60-40. 40 for salaries and pensions and 60 for modernization. So how the government is kind of, they've been really, good with the ex-servicemen. They've, spent the they've announced one rank, one pension. They've committed to spending more than 7,000 crore every year on increasing pensions, giving everyone the same pension irrespective of the year that they retire. But within that defense budget, there's no spectacular rise in the defense budget. It's just on an average of the last.
Worry us.
Yeah, it's absolutely. I mean, this is heartening because at the end of the day, for me, as someone who's been covering national security, the number one national security goal for India for the next 2.5 decades should be double-digit growth. Right?
Absolutely.
Because
Couldn't
that
agree
should
more
be
with
the
you on that.
priority. It should be double-digit growth, and from that is going to come. That is going to, take care of so many other sectors, including defense. It's going to give you more money to spend on defense. It's going to create a robust defense industrial base, as Rakeshji was just mentioning. The fact that we are now aspiring to be a defense exporter from being a major arms importer. We've consistently the second largest arms importer for the last decade or so. We account for like 9 to 10% of all the arms imports. So for the first time, we see a commitment on the part of the government to spend more monies within the country on the capital expenditure, for instance, which is something like 58 to 68% is now spent domestically. So they're walking the talk on Atmanirbhar Bharat.
Right.
It's not just a slogan. They're saying, look, we commit to buying from...
Atmanirbhar defense.
Absolutely.
That was
From
the
private
theme of
sector.
2020 budget. I mean, Karthikeya mentioned themes for the budget. I don't know what the theme this year is.
We don't know
I
what
wish,
is the
I
theme for
wish
the
I did.
2023 budget.
But it was
Suspense.
Atmanirbhar Bharat in 2020.
Okay.
So
I'm going to take, since we're all being devil's advocates and speaking on the opposite, I'm going to take the discussion completely away from defense, since Sandeep has just told us exactly what you need to know about defense, and then take it to this wonderful topic called crypto. I know the moment I say crypto, most of you watching will be like, why are we discussing crypto? Isn't it already done? Isn't it already over? Unfortunately, it's not. Crypto is still in the mix. Karthik, do you think, if at all, there could be any kind of announcement? Because at the end of the day, crypto has to be brought into the formal tax net of things if you're going to allow it to exist. There's so many questions over crypto. Talk to us. Do you think the budget will address the challenges around crypto, especially with regards to taxation?
I doubt it. Crypto has become like this bad word in India and in many other countries as well. So I doubt the budget is going to lay a lot of emphasis on the crypto, maybe a fleeting reference here or there. What happened last year was that crypto was also brought under the tax net. However, it is still considered as an asset class, so to speak, which is not regulated. It's an unregulated, speculative asset class. So RBI doesn't regulate it, SEBI doesn't regulate it, Ministry of Finance doesn't regulate it, nobody regulates it, IT Ministry doesn't regulate it, right? But the beauty or the challenge thereof is that there's a 30% tax on crypto. But you cannot offset that 30% tax against any losses you've made in the asset class. So let me stick to the same 100 rupee example. You've made a profit of 100 rupees on one transaction using cryptocurrencies. That's your profit, right? You pay 30 rupees from that straight into the tax. Another transaction, you've made a loss of 50 rupees. Now you can't adjust that 50 rupee loss to offset your 30 rupee gain. So every profitable transaction is taxed at 30.
And every
no
loss-making
losses are
transaction
offset.
you're left alone.
Right. So the point is, and that's why we are seeing crypto exchanges are almost shutting down, bleeding, raids on them, etc., unaccounted for money, terror financing, multiple theories around it. So the point really is, will the budget, especially in the election year, really try to encourage a speculative currency, so to speak? I doubt it.
Good point. Now that we're done with the crypto discussion, quickly on that front, let's get back to the main discussion.
Crypto is dead.
Crypto is dead. We're not saying it. I'm not saying it. That's what is being said. We're trying to repeat what is being said. So we'll see what happens going forward. Rakesh ji, you were talking about a theme, and Karthikeya was talking about the themes of the budget that used to exist. A clear Prime Minister's signature on all these budgets. If I can ask you to speculate, what could be or what should be the theme, considering the way Nirmala Sitharaman has been presenting budgets. It's the 5th budget Nirmala Sitharaman is presenting. If you can expect or even talk about a theme going forward.
I think the theme would be aligned to this $5 trillion target. Amrit Kal. Somewhere in between, there would be a word coinage. He's so good with that. So I think, largely it would be growth, sustaining growth. My prescription would be rather than jumping for more growth, it has to be sustaining growth. And I think it's important to point out to the corporate sector role. I keep saying that, Karthik knows that. There is, I met R.C. Bhargav, he's a veteran, he's top India Inc. voice.
The chairman of Maruti Suzuki.
Forever. Yeah. And he told me he's not going to retire, retired. He's 88. What he said is very, very important. I think he was talking about taxing cars, it's a socialist mindset which Karthik was talking about. We need to move away from that because auto means manufacturing, manufacturing means jobs. The PLI, which is a great scheme to my mind, it's in its early days, has yet not been able to translate into heavy jobs. It is doing heavy lifting in terms of the capex, but that capex is not converting. So that's why they are adding the basket, which will possibly in the budget. They'll bring in sectors which are pharma, toys, where there is job intensity possibly. So that could be a part of the budget.
Okay.
No, so coming to this point about the corporate sector. So he said, if we have to bring universal, equity in terms of per capita income growing, you have to do it by investing in wealth creators. You cannot create wealth without wealth creators being wealthy. Very important. So the point here I'm making is this budget should look at expanding the cake rather than buy into this leftist argument, cut the cake.
Right? Karthikeya, you want to come in on that?
तुम कृष्णा बोलोगे कि ये कहानी सुना रहे हैं, शायद कहानियां ही बच गई हैं सुनाने के लिए.
It depends on which poet you are going to.
Oh, good point, Karthikeya. Wait, 1 second, Karthikeya. Before we listen to Karthikeya's story, talk about poetry. For all those watching this, special broadcast here on Newsstand, expect some poetry from Nirmala Sitharaman's budget presentation. She's been quoting, although she's a Tamil by birth, and in the first budget, I think she quoted a Tamil poem. She's been taking different languages. In the last budget presentation, she quoted a Kashmiri poet.
Which I was like, Dinanath Nadin.
Dinanath Nadin. So expect quotable quotes from ancient poetry from any Indian language, not specifically Tamil or any other South Indian language. So be prepared for that. Meanwhile, Karthikeya, you were telling us.
I'm the non-expert on the panel, so I'll limit myself to the theme.
You want to take politics out of the budget?
No, I'm not going to take politics out of the budget. You see,
you can't do that.
No, I can't do that. It's impossible. See, when this government came to power in 2014, I think it got burdened by this narrative of rich against poor. When this jibe of suit boot ki sarkar came, and Arun Jaitley said, "Acha, this is suit boot ki sarkar. Aapki to suitcase ki sarkar hai." But it worked. The only disruption this government did was demonetization. After that, there have been no disruptions. Prime Minister has not disrupted the system. If you look at Prime Minister is a man of continuity. He hasn't disrupted things the way Manmohan Singh disrupted the system, or even Morarji Bhai did it. He was the first Prime Minister to go for a demonetization in 70s. So I think there was a conversation which took place between N.N. Vora, then Principal Secretary, to I.K. Gujral, who was the Prime Minister. And I think this government should unburden itself of this rich versus poor narrative. Because of this, you have this whole subsidy architecture. कि कोई कह ना पाए कि आप गरीबों के खिलाफ हैं. So one day I.K. Gujral was sitting, in a very lackadaisical way, and N.N. Vora, Principal Secretary, was seized of it that this is not typical I.K. Chopi I.K. Gujral, man of Sher o Shairi, a person who was clued into files, the larger things. And he said, sir, kya ho gaya? And he said, do you know what people are telling me behind my back? So N.N. Vora said, what, sir? He said, people are saying, ye Punjabiyon ki sarkar hai. And then N.N. Vora said, so then let's behave like Punjabis. So if agar aap pe bola ja raha hai, ameeron ki sarkar hai, jaisi bhi sarkar hai, behave like that, because you have the mandate. Who has got this simple majority? Twice, boss, it was Jawaharlal Nehru, and the second time was Indira Gandhi. The first time Indira Gandhi had a very thin majority. She was being supported by communists in Lok Sabha. Right. The only time she had majority was in 1971, and she took a left turn. So I have grown up in an India जहाँ दूध और पानी के लिए क्यू लगा करती थी साउथ एवेन्यू से लेकर निजामुद्दीन में. I don't like that India. This is an India of plenty. I appreciate that. That is why I appreciate what Narasimha Rao did. Yes, in terms of both foreign policy and economy. I'm really appreciative of reformist Prime Minister. So I think Modi ji should take the big step, should unburden himself of these charges कि आप तो गरीबों की सोचते नहीं है. He has done that.
Karthik Malhotra wants to come in on that. Karthik, go ahead.
Right. So I think, sticking to the function of the theme of the progressive, reformist Modi government, I think what we really need to focus on is per capita GDP. And that is something I really want to touch upon. You grow at 6.5%, 6.8%, double-digit growth that Sandeep was alluding to. All that is excellent. But the point is, who's doing the heavy lifting? If that GDP is coming only from government spending or animal spirits of the corporate sector, capex investments, is it leading to job creation? Number one. Number two, is it really igniting the rural economy?
Correct.
Right. So the rural economy, three drivers of it. There are rural wages, there is rural agri and rural non-agri. Is demand really going to come from there? That is something that we really need to be cognizant of. We can grow at whatever clip.
Yes.
We can reach 5 trillion, 7 trillion, end of the decade, third largest economy by 2050, 2070, carbon neutral. We can talk about all those macros. But the fundamental point is it going to be inclusive growth even till the last mile, and can we really have demand coming in because the rural economy has ignited? Look at two-wheeler sales, a very formidable indicator of the rural economy. We are at the lowest ebb in nearly a decade. Now, two-wheelers is, depending on where you're coming from and what social strata you belong to, it's the second or the third largest capital investment you make. Number one being the house. Number two, perhaps being a car if you come from the urban areas or the
upper middle class.
Upper middle class, right. But two-wheeler sales defines the mood of the rural economy. So stock markets can reach wherever, FD rates can reach wherever, and FD rates, of course, incidentally, are also linked to the monetary policy, which is linked to Fed tightening monetary policy in the US, etc., inflation, all of that, right? But we've really got to focus on per capita GDP as a theme of the
Cabinet has ended, and they have cleared the budget.
Right,
again,
that's
per capita
Karthikeya's
and-
latest news update. For all those watching special broadcast, Karthikeya, if you can just repeat that for us.
The cabinet has ended. They have cleared the budget. In the next 15 minutes, it will be presented in the House.
Right, 15 minutes to go for the budget, ladies and gentlemen. Last comments over here. Some important discussions going on. Per capita GDP is a very important point. Rural demand, incidentally, has not bounced back as much as it should have post the pandemic.
And
It's still
that's where,
trailing.
Krishna, if I can come in again, I have a slight disagreement both with my very senior colleagues Karthikeya Sharma and Rakesh ji. When a scheme like Narega is looked down upon, or Manrega is sort of not seen in the context of why it was created and why it has been sustained. It's pure Keynesian economics. You get people to dig trenches and then you fill them up. Even if they are not doing something that we define as productive, at the end of the day, you see infrastructure spend, heavy lifting being done on infrastructure spend, which is the government's capex. Who is contributing to that infrastructure development at a brick and mortar ground level? These are laborers who are coming in, who are part of the Narega scheme, who are getting paid for building infrastructure in the country, right? We are much better off with a scheme like Manrega than printing currencies that we saw the West did to get more money in the bank accounts of the people to spur an artificial demand.
No, that's fine.
And also, I have a evil. I think this is also because a lot of regional social welfare schemes are being criticized today. Maybe because the regional governments are not in agreement with the center.
Major disruption. The whole world is looking at India's stack today. The COVID example.
Exactly.
So bringing in technology to ensure that there are no leakages in itself is a huge success story. Second, and most important thing is that Manrega, Karthik mentioned, it is, as I said, social sector schemes are very important.
Yes.
Mr. Modi did not fall for the temptation, domestic and global. Raghuram Rajan, Rahul Gandhi, everybody is saying give cash. He resisted that. To my mind, that's a huge reform. The reason that we are in a happy situation today, not in a great, robust situation, but we are in a happy situation is because we did not go for the cash route. And Manrega has to be reimagined. Any scheme which is going for the last 10 years without any reimagination is set to
So you're saying
cause
Manrega
trouble.
should stay, but a revamped and a reformed
It has to lead
Manrega.
to economic activity.
Manrega,
question asked.
was inspired when Sharad Pawar was Chief Minister in Maharashtra. That scheme was introduced in 3 districts because there was drought and the work had to be given. Now during UPA we know how Narega came into being, then it turned into Manrega. My limited point is Manrega does not lead to creation of economic assets. It's not like a Marshall Plan. It's not like the Americans spent in 30s and 40s where they created infrastructure and highways and the cities came up. I think Narega needs to reimagine itself. You can't dig a pond and then redig it again. You need to have asset creation. And then it affects the mobility of labor. Ask any person who is part of the rural economy. The rural labor, the cost of rural labor has gone up. people don't want to migrate. They don't want to leave the villages.
There's
so
a
the
demand
labor
from
has
the
become
rural
very,
economy
very costly.
also.
It's very, very economic. You can't afford labor in villages anymore.
On the rural economy, there's a very fine nuance which I think Karthik missed, was that, when post-COVID, the first recovery came from rural economy.
That's right.
And we're not able to sustain it because, there is pressure on the savings are moving out now. We've spent a lot of money.
Well, also the rural economy was lesser affected as compared to the urban economy.
Not really. You see, urban economy, you are sitting at home, you are getting salaries, less salaries. Rural economy showed a lot of resilience. Yes, there is a challenge. India will only grow at double digit or even 8% if all the engines fire. That's tier 2, tier 3 cities and rest of India. That's not happening in the same proportion. But there's an aspiration, there's an appetite, which should be fueled. So I would conclude with 4 Ps.
Please do.
Learning
Please
from
do.
Mr.
Please
Modi.
do. Love
We are getting into the spirit of the government presentation.
So the first one is we must sustain these 4 Ps. First P is public spending, which we just discussed. Public welfare, public spending linked to public welfare. Here again, Manrega doesn't fit in.
Okay.
Because it doesn't lead to, except for the cash dole of 100 man days, it is there. Third is consumption. Private consumption has led this recovery that we're talking about. That has to be sustained. For that, you need disposable income. Lastly, private investment. If that does not fire, we're not going to achieve any sustained growth. Because 75% of India's GDP is contributed by private sector. It has to spend, which it is not yet spending.
Sandeep,
No,
if I can ask you, 75% of private sector, but private sector has always been questioned as why aren't you investing enough? Finance Minister has been asking again and again and again, and they are like, well, let us know when time is good enough and then we'll invest.
So then,
everybody else is very happy about a new government, but private
Yeah.
sector is not very happy about investing money with the confidence of this new government.
They're not happy with being asked questions.
so that,
No, but Chandrasekharan, the Tata
Rakesh, when
Sons
was the
chairman,
la-
the Tata Sons chairman made a very valid
When
point.
was the last time when after the budget the finance minister had met the president? Do you recall finance ministers meeting the president after the cabinet?
not,
I think,
it's
maybe it started
for the
in this
first time.
government only.
Or even before the cabinet?
But she
On
laid the
budget
red
day?
carpet for the budget in her
So this
speech.
is Nari Shakti. This is
I- you know,
No, she laid the context
If
in
you
the
ask
budget.
me, I'm very surprised because I haven't seen it. 15 years of...
I'll have to
Supreme
cross-check.
Commander with the Supreme Finance Minister.
Since nobody is there from the private sector, I think it's important to put that Chandrasekharan perspective.
What he said yesterday.
He said, government of India, Mr. Modi says something,
Yeah.
and everybody falls in plan, and then you spend $10 billion, PLI, semiconductors. He says, I have a board to represent.
Yeah.
I have shareholders.
I'm
I can't
answerable
just
to
put up
them.
a business plan. And Karthik, what business plans are all about. So, I have a business plan, and I have to be accountable for that business plan. It takes time to unlock that large sums of money. So I think
And I
that
think it's also linked to the global macro economy. Where will you get the confidence from when there is a global slowdown expected?
That's right.
Will you really make billions of dollars worth of capital investments today and bet on something that will give you some yield maybe 2 years, 3 years down the line?
Yeah.
That's like, asking the private sector to set up oil wells when there's no oil, So that's the whole thing. And that's what they fixed, by the way, in the defense sector, where they said that, look, we assure you orders, 70% of the capex is going to be to the indigenous defense industry, right? So that's how they kind of fix things. And they need to do something like that for the...
I think our
Indian economy as well.
discussion is primarily in India. Earlier it used to be like, for example, railway budget. It was nothing but about ticket prices. It has been done away
No,
with.
also new routes,
been
depending
absorbed.
upon where the railway
been
minister is from. If you had a railway minister from West Bengal, more trains in West Bengal. If you had a railway minister from UP, more trains in UP. This is how India was.
I was in San Jose.
Good that the railway budget has been shut down.
Thank God for that.
I was
been
in San
absorbed,
Jose in
subsumed into
2015,
the-
Yeah, it's a great
and I had the
job.
opportunity
It is.
to meet a lot of startups there in San Jose. So, and the Prime Minister had his meeting in SF.
We should come to startups too after you.
Actually, yeah, we're going to come to that. Yeah.
So, what happened, and that's what I thought, that, we are very focused on what will budget do, how is budget being conceived, and how will budget spur the economy, how will budget represent India, how is budget the political signature of this and that. But you see, when we talk about startups and other things, it's about culture. It's about culture. We have failed to create that startup culture.
Yeah.
We have startup, but we don't have that Silicon Valley sort of a startup thing.
Let me come in on this. In 2016, there were about 450 startups in India. Guess how many they are today? Take a wild guess.
86,000.
85,000.
Spot on, 84,000. From 450 startups in 2016, we have 84,000 plus startups. And how many unicorns, Karthik Malhotra, in India?
I think 100 plus on last count. Honestly, I lost track. But again, 2016, we were struggling to count.
So the
10
culture you're
unicorns
talking
on our
about,
And we have
for the
decacorns.
culture to happen, you need
Decacorns,
critical mass. And I think we have the critical mass of startups in the country for the culture to be developed. And Rakesh ji and Karthik, both, all of you, I want to ask, there has to be announcements for the startup community in
Absolutely.
the budget,
Yeah,
isn't
yeah.
it? Any one of you can answer.
Absolutely. I think, the government has also to be a little realistic about startups, the way they're looking at that. This
Mainly for employment generation.
I'm just saying, so this unicorn push is a valuation game.
Yeah.
Which is basically for the punters and the pundits. It should not be the government's priority to push for the unicorn status. It's good they're unicorns. So I think I spoke to Amitabh Kant and he did say that we will pursue profitability as the key driver. So out of these 85,000, I don't know how many are profitable. That's a key question to ask.
Very important question.
So I think government may look to re-engineer the startup ecosystem. I don't know how they'll do it. My sense is they should move away from this unicorn push and give some incentives.
Why?
Yeah, tax breaks.
No,
Give them
unicorn
tax
is a
breaks.
valuation game, Karthikeya.
Okay.
And it's not all Indian capital. That is why you see, the valuation game is also, the bubble has expanded to a
Externally
point that
funded,
it can
yeah.
burst any time now. Because
Edutech
again,
sector.
links back to the Fed. There are safer investment havens available
Than
where
India.
investors
Yeah.
are parking capital in the US Treasury because it's giving you an assured rate of return rather than a risky startup in India which may or may not become profitable.
One last question. Startups, unicorns, forget about unicorns. I'm only talking about startups from the point of view of employment generation. There's so much talk
Absolutely.
about
100%
employment,
agreement.
employment.
100%
Startups
agreement.
have to be a huge contributor to employment generation in the country. Sandeep.
Absolutely. No. Where is the doubt? I mean, the fact that you have so many startups today, 86,000. I mean, just imagine, even if one of them is employing 10 people, each startup that takes the pressure away from government jobs. Today, every 25% of
Absolutely.
all the job seekers are rushing for government jobs because of the security that it gives them, right? I mean, that cannot happen. You can't have PhDs running after jobs for sweepers, which is what we've been seeing. And why are they doing that? They're doing it because of the safety that a government job gives them, the pension that it gives them.
I'll take his argument further because that's why I use the word culture. 20 years ago, if you would have asked any person, middle class, if you read even the memoir of Mr. Dulat, क्या बनोगे? सरकारी नौकर बन जाओ, क्या बनोगे? Engineer बन जाओ. What will you be? Doctor बन जाओ. So it was about security. Startup culture it creates a new culture within the Indian mindset. Take risk, succeed. If you fail, quickly fail fast. Right. Come back on it. There is no shame in failing. This is something which was not part of a middle class lingo. The fail thing was not there. No, you have to be safe.
Yeah.
Prime Minister is on record saying that we need job, seekers rather than, we need job givers rather than job
Exactly.
seekers. Yeah.
In that sense, now talk about jobs and startups. We all know that startups have been under a cloud for the amount of firings that they have done in the last 6 months. And we know that the technology, Indian startups are mostly tech startups. And technology sector overemployed during post-pandemic world. Now that we're done with the post-pandemic world, we're in a new world. And then now they realize the fact that we don't need that many jobs because not everybody is going to be sitting at home and ordering things on the phone or doing things on the phone. They're going to be outside. We don't need that many people in the back end. So, talk to us about this conundrum, Karthik, if you can. One is startups are the main source of employment generation going forward. Huge chunk of it. And the other, are they hiring and firing right?
Absolutely, Krishna, couldn't agree more. So I think the burden of employment will not fall completely on startups because there is only this much employment that they can generate. Unfortunately, most of our employment is still in the rural agriculture domain. And if you look at any developed economy globally, the migration from rural to urban has actually led to overall economic growth, overall development.
Quite right.
So in context of that, yeah, startups will employ people and business models should emerge where the migration of rural to urban happens. But I think I will tend to agree more with what Rakeshji was pointing, that business model sustenance is absolutely critical. Sandeep said startups will employ 10 people, you are developing that employment, but if you're going to get rid of 3 out of those 10 in 2 years because you had a great funding coming in which helped you sort of keep your finances and your expenditures vibrant enough to hire more people, but if your profitability has not helped you sustain, then it'll be difficult to hold on to those jobs.
Right. Karthikeya was talking about it. There's no shame in failing. That's the
Right,
startup
right.
culture.
No,
but
so
then, once you fail, it's important that you learn from it and you don't keep making the same mistakes. So we've seen what has happened with overhiring, irrational expansion, what it leads. And I think, apart from the budget, startups start learning, better, more sustainable business models.
So startups are one of many engines.
But
It's a business cycle.
But I think this budget will also have a large portion dedicated to MSMEs. I think that was a priority sector hit during COVID. And I think it became part of our economic narrative.
As I said yesterday, it will continue to get hit because the export market is going to be laggardish, it's going to be slow, and MSMEs are 45% exports. So I think they'll have to do something. They've given the credit. That credit is not converting into jobs or sustenance for MSMEs. I think we missed one key piece, which is agriculture. I think agriculture has to fire from being a laggard to a leader.
Yeah.
In that sense, I do expect the Prime Minister to increase the cash incentive for the farmer scheme from 6,000 rupees to 8,000 rupees. I think it's likely. I don't have
Very specific expectation. Very specific expectation. We'll watch out for that, Rakesh ji, when the budget announcement comes
Can I
out.
ask a question to Rakesh?
Please
You
go
know, agriculture has a problem of underemployment. People don't want to leave their land. They don't want to migrate because land is also about political power in Indian society.
Also disguised employment.
Especially in North India. So you have both cultural attachment and it is a source of political power, unlike West, where you can be a farmer but not politically powerful. You can have 10,000 hectares of land but can be an average middle class guy. Here with 1,000 hectares, you can be a big shot in Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. So in that context, what are the key reforms?
Three reforms for agriculture, which I have been saying for the last 10 years. Nobody is hearing. I think, they're not worth it, maybe.
You've been saying it for 10 years. Today is a very special day, very special budget 2023
Finance
presentation.
Minister to take it into
3
account, but
minutes to
we hear you
go.
out.
3 minutes. My director is telling me 3 minutes to go.
3 bullet points. Societal mindset. The family values at times go against agriculture reforms. What he was referring to. We are so attached to this. Second, technology aversion. We are not willing to change the seed pattern and try and grow. If we're growing potatoes, we only want to grow potatoes. Mere dadaji aloo ugate the. Third, we are missing the private sector investment in agriculture.
Private-public partnership in agriculture is very important, isn't it? And also, taking off from what startups, you see the number of agri-tech startups that have mushroomed in the last 2 years.
Multiply 100 times.
Absolutely.
So
Very
we
well
need
said.
Krishna, we need a green revolution 2.0. There's no other way for the economy to move ahead. It
And I
will
think
add
this
1
also
or
has to be
2%.
linked. Agri-tech has to be linked even to climate tech.
Right.
So I think these are going to be two drivers of
Krishna,
the
is it also, because when I was in America, because these tech companies took me, I find that in India you have aversion to new seed technology. And tech companies only come in when seeds come in. Is it because of that?
There are many factors affecting it. Like you were saying, there's a tech aversion in India. Forget about everything else.
Especially
there's a
in
tech
farmers.
aversion to take to agriculture. Forget about seeds availability. You can do technology in terms
They'll
of
do
irrigation.
WhatsApp, they'll do video calls, but they'll not change the seed pattern.
We are all dependent on the rains. I mean, how much more basic can it get?
And I think that's what Karthik was talking about. For farmers to do better, to take to technology, they need to be shown how technology can help them. If technology can tell them when it can rain, when it doesn't, and they can use it and they can see the benefits of it all, it'll be fantastic. But this conversation is going to go on for the rest of the day because it is the special budget 2023 presentation right here on News 9. We will be bringing you a breakdown of the budget. After it's presented, we have Karthikeya Sharma, Rakesh Khar, Sandeep Punithan, and Karthik Malhotra, and of course me. And we will all be trying to break down and deconstruct the budget just for you and simplify it for you and tell you what exactly you need to know from budget 2023. We have less than a minute to go before the actual budget presentation begins in the parliament. And I have only one comment to make, is that so far we're talking about budget, but the number of mentions that the Prime Minister has got for the budget is way more than the actual Finance Minister who presents the budget. It's a very unique case scenario in India that, it's interesting is all I can say at this stage. And we are waiting, counting down. As you can see, people are settling down on the floor of the House. The Speaker has begun talking and he will be handing it over to Finance Minister. Let's quickly cut across live and listen in to India's Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman present Budget 2023.
Honourable Speaker, I present the budget for 2023-2024. This is the first budget in Amrit Kal. This budget hopes to build on the foundation laid in the previous budget.